for me, this feels like a good opportunity to have this discussion with someone else in the space that's working at a large site, because I'm usually on here on the podcast, jumping on my soapbox and screaming and yelling about things. And then I generally don't put them out because I don't want to just sound like an angry bastard all the time. But it feels to me like it's just this self-perpetuating cycle, right? We get into the situation where so much of the criticism is, well, we don't know these people. We're not introduced to more of these people. We only hear about them once they reach a certain point. And my argument is always, well, you're going to the wrong sources, or you're not looking hard enough, whether it's UFC.com, you guys at the UG have a business relationship with UFC.com. You guys put our stuff out. Appreciate that. Although I'm a jerk about it sometimes. I get like this. I at least own that I'm an asshole half of the time. But it just feels like all the criticisms, or some of the criticisms, are things that can be defeated if we shift a little bit of our perception and the way we're doing things. Like, no disrespect to any site that is doing the stuff you mentioned, or putting out the photographs of so-and-so throughout the years. Get that traffic. I understand business overlords dictate certain things, but it also means you're contributing to all of these athletes that you and others are saying are unknown, being unknown. Am I off base? Am I on point?
Nope.
Somewhere in between?
You're absolutely on point. You know what I mean? And it's just such a tough balance to stretch, to reach, because you're absolutely right. I mean, there are, you look at like the major publications. I mean, the salaries that they have on hand and the operational costs that they have on hand are significant, and nobody's in business to make money. And so, if media was this perfect thing where it didn't have profits at the center of it, like, we could do it a lot different, but it does. It's a business like anything else. And so you got to drive those page views, and so you can't fault anybody for those strategies. It's just, I wish there was that balance, because I think it goes so over that, where it's like, you have these quarterly meetings with the corporate overlords, and I don't see a whole lot. And listen, to Gannett's credit, I will say they did a lot of like trying to highlight beautiful stories, trying to highlight meaningful impacts in journalism. But at the end of the day, your most direct bosses are looking at, hey man, you know what our page views were last year? You know what they are this year? You know what the click-through rate is? Why are we this way? Why, do you know what the budget was for what we were supposed to be at? It's frustrating, right? So you get it, but you're 100% right. I got to a point, especially when I'm not doing as much writing anymore, but when I was doing more, like, I got to a point where it's like, no offense, but like, how many GSP stories have I written? You know what I mean? How many Anderson Silva stories have I written? Like, then there's so many amazing stories. Like, here's this guy that just made his way in. How about the it was one that was interesting, not recently, the Thimba Garimbo story, where he's like tweets out his bank account that he had $7 left. And then that opens a whole nother can of worms where people are like, that's not a beautiful story. That's a horrible story. He's a professional athlete. He should be rich. And I see the beauty in it, where it's like, man, like, think about what he risked and think about what he was willing to do and to come to this. I just talked to Dan Ige earlier today, and he was so open and honest about the mental challenges of the losing streak that he was on, and how difficult it was to just keep going and to keep believing in yourself when all the criticism is out there. So you're absolutely right, man. I think there's so many more amazing stories.